Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Top Secret News Radio Show. I'm Christina George, and for the next 2 hours, I'm back in action again. No, I've missed a few shows on this side, but I'll tell you, I'm glad to be back. And tonight, I have to say, I have a great guest. He's actually been on my other show, Paranormal Connections, and some of you actually caught that show. Was last Monday when I had my guest on, and I'll tell you, it was an amazing show. So good that we decided to bring him back for a second show and talk about the topic that we would talk about on this show all the time. So tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about alien abduction, uh, hybridization, human alien hybrid children, the women that have had this happen to them. You guys know it's a very interesting topic for me, so I'm super excited to talk about it tonight. We had a lot of questions from last week's show when I had my guests on, and so I've written down a bunch of those, and I want you guys to go ahead and ask your questions too. If you'd like to join us on the show, I'm going to put the link down in the comments in just a few moments. All you need to do is click on that. You click on from a laptop, a notepad, your phone, iPhone, any of it, no software to download. All you got to do is click on the link and allow access to your camera and your microphone, and you're in. If you don't want to come on live, that's perfectly fine. You can always just put your message down in the comment section and they will show up on the screen. So with that being said, as I said, my two guests tonight are John Semple and Jack Roth, and they're from J3 Films. And it's very cool because, like I said, probably about 6-7 years ago, I had both of them on, and they had just released a film called Extraordinary, the Stan Romanek story. And I was very fascinated at that time with the stories, and everything. So I had them on the show, and the show did great in the archives. And so I was contacted by John recently, and he said, "Hey, Christina, I have a new documentary coming out, and it's called Extraordinary, the Seeding." And so I'm looking at this film. The film's already won numerous awards. Like, they got like Best Documentary, the People's Choice Awards at the International UFO Congress, and I also saw the preview, and so they sent it to me, and boy, oh boy, it left me wanting more. So they then said, check the show out, and if you think that it's something you'd like to have us back on to discuss on your show, we'd love to come on. And so they sent me the film to preview, and I'll tell you, oh my gosh, you guys definitely want to hear these stories and see this film. I'm telling you, I was blown away, and I still am, and I can't wait to have all of you be able to check it out as well. So we're going to give all the information on where you're going to be able to see it, and all of that, and how you can support them and what they're doing. But I'm telling you, if you're into abduction, especially now, I know there's a lot of women who listen to my show around the world that have come to me and told me about their abduction stories where they have hybrid children that they are then brought back to meet and care for a period of time. So for people like you, this is something that's going to really connect with you. For others who may be male or females that have never had that, but are interested in ufology, abduction, things like that, it's, again, something that you definitely should watch. It is straightforward testimonials from the people have actually encountered all this, and it was very, very telling, very emotional film. But again, tonight is the night if you have questions to start getting them ready, because the show is about to begin. All right, so we'll bring on my guests real quick. Hey, John. Hey, Jack. How are you?
Howdy. Happy Halloween.
Thank you. Happy. Oh, that's right. Happy Halloween. I'm telling you, between everything going on, I'm just like in a daze. I don't even know what day it is. I'm just like every day is flowing into the next, no sleep type of thing. Jeez Louise. Well, thank you for joining me this Halloween Eve. I appreciate it. Not out going to go out trick or treating?
No, I'm actually in Lima, Peru at the moment, and we were just walking back through the park in Miraflores, and it is packed with kids. I have never seen so many people out trick or treating. It was incredible, and the costumes, anywhere from little kids up to grown-up kids, decked out in costumes. It's pretty cool.
Wow. What about you, Jack?
Well, it's already over really here. I'm in Florida, so it's a little after 9. And the kids it's usually from like 7 to 9. So already handed out candy, the whole 9 yards. So have a ton of I bought too much candy. I bought way too much candy because I thought it's just, you never know, right? No. So but better more than less. I want kids to enjoy themselves. So, but yeah, that's, and now it's over. Right. But now, for the last week, we've been watching shows. I've been like, not just horror movies, but like serial killer stuff, just like real, like documentaries. So I'm like I'm in Mindhunter frame of mind right now. I'm like, okay, Ed Kemper, John Wayne Gacy. I mean, there's all this psychological, but it's fascinating. So that's another conversation.
Right. Well, I, as you heard in the introduction, I had you guys back here. We were saying like 7 years ago, and that show did really, really well when we were, talking about the Stan Romanek case and the document you guys did on him. And here we are, all these years later, and now we're at this new film, Extraordinary This Evening. And some people that are listening tonight saw last Monday's show when you were on. I got a lot of good feedback on it. But for those who weren't, how do you go from the Stan Romanek, story to alien hybrid children? It's a big jump, but yet not really.
Not really. Right. It was more a question of, it was the next step. In the sequence of information we wanted to present to people. And it was the next step in our journey, a personal journey as well, not only as filmmakers, but just as people who were experiencing these things and learning about it. So yeah, we ended, the Stan Romanek documentary, and here's this guy who, after all of his abductions, wound up getting phone calls from and having visitations from these children that were, telling him that they were his children, and they were these hybrid little girls. And it was incredibly fascinating. And, that's one of the things we talked about was, well, what is not so much the end game, but what is the end product, if you will, of abductions? Why are people being abducted? There's one thing to be experimented on, and you get a blood test done, or you get your skin checked, or DNA looked at. But there was something going on where the end result, the byproduct of these abductions, were these hybrid children. And we started to learn more and more about that. And we realized that, and and the key to that too is we also had women. We started to meet women who came up to us and started to talk to us about having unexplained pregnancies and having, again, abduction experiences, unexplained pregnancies, hybrid children in the picture down the road from that. So John and I realized, like, look, if we're going to take people from A, which is seeing a light in the sky, to, we're not sure what Z is yet, but we're going along this path of, well, what one thing happens, then another thing happens, and then another thing. It's a logical progression of the phenomena. And And that's why we knew in the second one we were good. We didn't know it was going to be such an emotional story at that point, but we knew we wanted to talk and get into the unexplained pregnancies more and the hybridization programs more.
And one of the things too, let me just follow up on that, was the outreach that we received from people who had seen the first film, and we were kind of taken aback by how many people reached out to us to let us know that they had their own story, and a lot of them had kept it to themselves because they really didn't think they had anybody to talk to. So we realized going into the second film that there was a large audience of people who felt like they had no one to talk to, that there wasn't a venue or a connection for them to share their story with people who would be understanding. So we definitely had a mindset going into this film that it was going to be more about the experiencer rather than the phenomena. And it wasn't really until we started vetting people, numerous phone calls with 30, 40 different people that we vetted for the film. And then the process of sitting across from people for several hours doing the interviews and hearing their, really just jaw-dropping stories. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, we were shocked by some of the things that we heard during the interviews and some of the things that were shared in the film. So it was a transformational process, definitely, for us when we realized that there's so much focus on the phenomena. And we were kind of going down that path a little bit too, but we also wanted to kind of, share the emotional side of it. And we did that, with Stan's story, a lot of evidence up front, a lot of emotion in the middle, and then some validation in the third act with Stan's film. But this film is very much all about what people go through when they're an experiencer and what they have to deal with every step of the way while it's happening, and then how they deal with it after they've had the experience, and what that's like to be an individual who's experienced something that other people may not quite understand because they have yet maybe to go through it themselves.
Well, and it's interesting that even though the phenomena it's much more out there now, where people are sharing their stories and come on shows like mine to share stories, there's still a lot of us out there, whether it be when it comes to abduction or even the paranormal experiences, that even though the phenomena is out there, people know that it exists, you can still have an experience where it will make you feel that your experience is not like everybody else's. And so nobody's going to believe you until you actually come and you speak to somebody. And then you find out that there are actually other people out there with very similar stories. And I'll tell you, it's one thing I used to love in the very beginning of getting into the paranormal, because the more connections I made, I started making, connecting with support groups and sending people that I was meeting to these support groups so that they could make friendships and they could have somewhere where they could talk about what they were going through and not feel judged. I made private groups for abductees so that they could come and share their stories and not feel like it would, even though it was on social media, that it was going to get out any further than the people they felt okay with. And I really enjoyed that. And as well, when I started mentoring, children with psychic abilities, I wanted them to connect with not only a support group, but children their own age that were going through things like that, where they could connect, video chat and everything. And then once a year get together and be able to meet each other in person. I mean, things like that. I think it's very, very important. So I think that what you guys are doing is very important, because you're taking the experience story to another level, to out to the film world, where, as podcasters and, things like that, we can put the story out. And if we have a big enough listening audience, it will get out there. But again, when you put it in film, it's out there forever and it gets out to so many more people. And I think that that's so powerful, because we're definitely seeing a change right now. And I think that all of this is helping, to kind of move people. But having an abduction as well is usually a very traumatizing experience. Was that what you guys found in interviewing the people you were vetting?
Yeah, we did. And it was there were threads throughout the stories that were very similar, but as we talked about that last time on the last show. But yeah, if people think about what's happening, and let's put it into context of something that's not ET related. You're abducted, but you can be abducted. You could be kidnapped. Um, and we just happen to be being abducted and kidnapped by ETs. So I get my point being is that people are experiencing being abducted against their will,
Right.
experimented on in one way or the other. And even though, obviously in a lot of cases, it's very similar things happening, but it's traumatizing. It's absolutely traumatizing. And in the people, that's what we were so fortunate to have people like Barbara Lamb and Yvonne Smith, other people that we interviewed in the film, who have been doing this for years, regression therapy in general for people who have gone through this. And they make no bones about it. It's post-traumatic stress disorder. They have PTSD. I don't say every person who's ever been abducted has, but a large majority have, because it's a traumatic experience. It's the same thing as coming back from war, being a war veteran, or, unfortunately, being raped in, we that has come up in the film where women were saying the word rape. They were raped in these abduction scenarios. And whatever, there's, humans go through a traumatic experience and a couple things happen. So they have post-traumatic stress disorder, where all of a sudden they're getting panic attacks, something triggers a memory, and all of a sudden they're sweating and they're a mess and they're having these flashbacks. And a lot of it is also, they're blocking it. Okay. Maybe a combination of a memory block from the ETs doing the memory block, but also our psychology, the psychology of the human mind, is we block those traumatic things. So it's only over time where a little comes out, more and more comes out. So yeah, there's definitely, there's that element of the post-traumatic stress disorder. And, if not post-traumatic stress disorder, if not to that level, it's distress, which is also not healthy and not good.
Yeah, and another big thing about it too, and this is discussed in the film, and we saw it during the interview process that we went through with some of these people, is that an individual has an experience, and their first response is, did this really happen to me? What the heck was that all about? What do I do with this? Who do I talk to about this? And a lot of times people won't say a word to anybody. They'll live with it, they'll bury it. And when you're burying something that is a traumatic experience, it doesn't go away. It's living in your subconscious in some way, shape, or form until it does come forward, and you have to deal with it at some point. So we have people who are dealing with these in their own way. Some people are reaching out to friends and family and close connections and sharing their stories, and some of them are getting comforted by those people. But a lot of people, when they finally, get the courage to share what happened to them, whether it's in a matter of days, weeks, months, or even years in some cases, they share their story, and they're either ignored or ridiculed for that. So, when something like that happens, they're going through the traumatic experience another time. So they're dealing with not only what I went through, and now I'm being told that I'm crazy, or that I'm, there's something wrong with me, that I need to go get help. And that doesn't make me feel better. So, imagine what it's like for, according to the research, that 1 in 50 people said that they've had an experience of some sort. That's a huge number.
Right.
So if we're looking at people who have had something that is, even if, let's say it's 1/100th of a percent of that, it's still a large amount of people who've had an experience. So if they're not sharing it, it's because they don't know who to talk to. So one of our goals was to facilitate a Discord, an opportunity for people to tell their stories and find their tribe and find people who've had experiences like them, so that they don't feel alone. And that's been a big part of this journey for us. And we realized that once we were done shooting the second film, is that there's an obligation here for us. And that became me personally, I'll tell a little story. I've told this before, but when we were working on the first film, my objective, and Jack and I talked about this all the time, is that we just didn't want to be pigeonholed in this genre. We had a ton of other ideas that we wanted to do, some that were religious based and some political based and some historical based, some paranormal based, just a lot of different subjects that we wanted to cover. And we felt that, after doing this one, that we might get pigeonholed if our distributor came back to us at some point and said, would you like to do this again? And they did. And it was kind of like, for me personally, I was kind of like, oh gosh, I don't know if I want to do this. This is going in the wrong direction. But they did say they were willing to give us an advance on royalties, which made it a lot easier to fund a portion of the production and post-production. So we said yes. But during the production process, it was a light bulb moment for me as we were interviewing different people. And I realized this is not about the phenomena. This is about the individuals and what they're going through. And that I felt at that moment that, for me personally, I was helping people understand better what might have happened to them. And there was something much more rewarding in that versus just telling stories that are, for many people, unbelievable. So right. You only get a lot of nodding heads from people who understand it. Therefore, our mission is to tell stories in a way that are engaging and enlightening and educational so that people are more interested in learning more. So it was a huge, I don't want to say it was like this light bulb moment, but there was like this warm wash of awareness with me that this was about helping humanity. And we talk about this all the time. This is a film about humanity. This is about people. We're talking about people, not just lights in the sky. We're talking about the individuals who are going through the process, and we're talking about hybrid children who are stuck somewhere, whether they're here on Earth, they're not connected to their mother of from the ovum. The OVA provider. So it gets to the core. And I know, I give Jack huge props for that from the very beginning when we were working on this. He said from day one, it's all about the kids. It's all about the kids. And that's something that everybody can relate to. So I can't emphasize enough that this film will probably disappoint people who are looking for phenomena-driven films, because that's not what this is. But for people who are on a journey to find out a little bit more about what may have happened to them or could be happening to somebody that they know, this is a film that will help you better understand the journey that an individual goes through when they have experiences like this.
Well, I've got some questions that are coming in, as well as some that we had from last Monday's show. So let me get on some of those. All right. So I have Dennis from New England, and he's asking, have either of you ever had your own personal abduction scenario?
I think I speak for both of us. That would be nothing that we're aware of. But it's a common question.
It is. Sure. We get that all the time. And we do preface it with not that we're aware of, but I think it's pretty safe to say that at this point in our lives, we would have known something. We've had sightings, we've had experiences and paranormal experiences, but as far as being abducted, not to our knowledge, no. And you know what? I have to say this. Sometimes I think that for whatever reason, we all play a role in whatever's playing out. And I think our role is to be documentarians and storytellers, and to be the people who step back a little bit from that and tell a good story and tell a compelling story about the people who are going through that. We're interested in the subject. We've had experiences, but we can step back enough to tell the stories that need to be told.
Well, here's a question to both of you. Doing, all the research that you did, has it ever made you think in the back of your mind, like, because a lot of people, their experiences don't come out until later in life. And then certain things start happening. And then it's like, then they finally go to regression. And it's like the floodgates opened of all of this information that that was just kept from you for a long time. And then your whole world changes in a second, or the hour that you're in regression, or 2 hours. So did it start to make either of you question if anything maybe have ever happened to you?
It's funny. we have John and I have had every one of these conversations, or it's so funny because we just talk about stuff like this, and you go back to, I start to think about my childhood. I'm like, like, did I ever see any owls outside my windows? I can't remember that. Did I have any of these screen memories? And but what I'm like, why was I so fascinated when I was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, reading the old UFO report, knowing without question that these things not only existed, but there was ET intelligence and ET life out there. Why for a 7-year-old would I feel that way? And one thing I have to say, and John can pick up on this, because when I say we've had experiences, you have the close encounter of the first kind, second kind, you have all that there, the categories. But, we've had some in the last year or two, I should say year, we've had experiences where I wouldn't be surprised if I found out one day that I was being observed in my bedroom while I was sleeping. Mm-hmm. And there have been ETs in my house. They didn't abduct me. not that I know of. I mean, John, how do I explain that? Right? It's these little.
No, there's the whole idea that it would be if you believe in all of this, and I think where Jack and I both come from is that we don't know what we don't know, but there's enough compelling evidence in storytelling, in corroborative storytelling, and historically, that it's been going on for quite a long time, that it's something that is worthy of noticing and worthy of talking about, having a civil discourse about the possibilities. That's really what we want to encourage people to do. It's just, ask the question, what if this is all true? And if it is all true, what does that mean? And it opens up an entire different conversation. It's not just about aliens, existing. It's about, where do we fit into that hierarchy, and are they our brethren? Are we all from the same cosmic dust? Which is what I personally believe. And I, in answering that question, I guess my initial thought is that, from a very young age, believe that, I had a difficult time in believing in the whole idea of organized religion as a 4-year-old, having conversations with my parents where it didn't make any sense to me. So where does that come from? So there are parts of the experience, I think, that both Jack and I have had, and part of the reason why we've come together in this lifetime is to go on this journey. We didn't know it 25 years ago that this was what we were going to be doing, but now it feels right. And I would say that when we first got connected in the mid 90s, and it all started with a paranormal experience that Jack had when he was visiting the Myrtles plantation in St. Francisville. And it kind of connected us right away. I mean, it was almost as if it was like, somebody, the marionette said, okay, let's bring these two guys together now. And it's their journey that's going to, take them somewhere where they're going to have knowledge and experience, knowing, and they're going to be able to help other people better understand. And I really think that that's what our purpose is. We've caught criticism before from some people who've seen films like this, saying they need empirical evidence for it to be a true documentary. We look at it as like, well, a documentary is about exposing people to something that they didn't know about.
Right.
And really our objective is not to prove anything. We're not out to prove anything. We're trying to present information to people in a way that maybe it hasn't been presented as clearly before and from a personal, heartfelt perspective before. But by doing so, hopefully we will get some people to, think about this whole concept a little bit differently and be willing to do their own research. So have we had experiences? Not that we can constantly say that we have, but I think we both have been kind of put into this fray, by a higher authority, or something that we agreed to that we may not be connected to at this point yet.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, people meet, especially in our world, it's like I meet people, the strangest places, and get connected with them for the strangest reasons. But I know that those are the people I'm supposed to connect with. You just know, right? So I completely get it. And I mean, again, I love the fact that you guys aren't here to prove anything to anyone. You're really putting the story out. And it's like, okay, believe it or don't believe it, that's your choice. But again, it's helping for all of those that do want to see it. It is helping them. That's what it's really about. Because again, for so many people, until they have their own personal experience, and again, I don't think that that's the way you want to get a personal experience, is have to be abducted, and go through some of the stuff that the women go through. And let me make it clear, the research shows that there are quite a few men that as well go through this, and their sperm is harvested for these hybrid children, and they are then taken back to the crafts to interact with their children. Reason being that they are part alien and have no emotion. So the human side of the child, when they're crying, needs to be comforted. They can't do it. So they need the mother to come, or the father to come back and to help raise them. And it's usually for a short amount of time. And sometimes they'll see them later in the future. And it's usually after that, it's like good experiences. You're not really having the rape or, all the medical experimentation. So it's interesting to watch how it goes from beginning to end. But again, it isn't gender specific. It will abduct both, and you have reportings of both. And I think that it could even be as high as equally. But I just think that men are much less willing to come and admit something like that.
Yeah.
One that you were abducted, but then that you were raped. I mean, again, it's it's a traumatizing thing, and men have careers and they've got family and friends, and they don't want to. They're like, oh my God, now you've been raped by an alien, and you got alien kids. I mean, just imagine the ridicule that we know people who came out with their stories get. Sure. But again, if you have any kind of career or something, it could really affect you.
Yeah, and that goes both ways. Men and women, and that's one of the things, we don't use the word lightly when we say that these people were brave and sharing their stories, because that was part of the vetting process. Is one, was it a good story? And what made it a good story is the emotional component, the conviction in which they tell their story made it a good story, not from a theatrical perspective, but did it sound genuine? And when they shared their story, was it compelling? Was it every time they shared it, was it the same story? That was important to us, because, if your story changes every time you tell it, chances are pretty good there's some fudging of the story, or elements of it that are being embellished. So that was important to us. But, when we're going through the vetting process, we had so many people who, some of the stories that they had to share were, again, we're privileged that we got people to share their stories with us. We also feel like we need to honor them, both the people who are willing to talk and the people who are not willing to talk, by sharing their story. So, there are people who are not willing to talk, and it's important to talk about them too, because their reasons are valid reasons. Right. So we had, several women that we spoke to and a few men that we spoke to that basically said, I so badly want to share my story, but I can't, because it could ruin my relationship. It could destroy my family. It could end my career. We were trying to get physicians to even validate some of the things that were going on. Same type of thing, is that they weren't willing to go out on that limb because there was too much to lose. So, going back to all the things that you just shared a few minutes ago, when you hear that and you're someone who doesn't, let's just say you're maybe in the middle of the bell curve and you heard a little bit about it, or not that much, and you hear somebody share what you just shared, you're like, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely crazy that something like this is even happening. This is nuts. Why would you even believe this? Well, when you start to spend the time with people who share their stories in a way that we have, and you hear the corroborative evidence, you hear the emotion, you experience their transitional ups and downs that they go through over the course of a day, because they're enlightened in one moment and in tears the next, because it's just so traumatic. The highs and the lows are very extreme. So I think, what's so important about a film like this is that it needs to appeal to a greater audience than people who already believe in the subject matter. So a big reason why we did what we did and the approach that we did was to reach that middle ground, that middle audience, that middle of the bell curve, not the people who already believe and not the people who are skeptics. Those extremes are going to always battle it out. But we just didn't feel like we needed to pander to somebody who had already believed. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just that we could have very easily made a film that people who already believed in this subject matter loved it. And it only played to that audience. But we felt it was a bigger responsibility to try to tell a story in a way that would appeal to a much greater audience. So we always had that in our mind, was how do we look at this from the perspective of somebody who might not believe? And so our journalistic approach, Jack and I both have journalism backgrounds, is that we wanted to kind of come at it from a way of, well, what could be the reason that this happened? Or if there's enough evidence that supports a specific storyline or a event process, which the film goes through the different events or the steps in an abduction experience, starting at a young age all the way through meeting hybrid children. So, we wanted to go on that type of a journey of education and awareness, so that somebody who might not know that much about this, when they see this, they will be compelled, hopefully, to do more research and learn more, versus saying this is too fantastic. I can't even begin to comprehend this. So, yeah, we're going off on a little bit of a different tangent here, but I think one of the things that I felt like we needed to do a little bit more after we were done with you last week is that we're convicted in what we're doing, which is to tell stories that we think everybody needs to hear more about. So if everybody hears these stories, they can then draw their own conclusions.
Well, do you ever feel like you might be right at the front end of this change, and might help bring about this awareness and people really opening up? Because I'll tell you, the stories, they were all very compelling and very emotional in one way or another. I mean, some of them had made me cry. Like, it was like you could just feel what they were. Well, me being an empath, that doesn't help. But as
You're
I
not alone. A lot of people have that same experience.
they're going through, and it was, for me, hard to watch. But again, I've heard these stories so often. It's sad, but I'm happy that these people are brave and coming forward, and letting people know it's okay. A lot of us have been through these, experiences, and we should come together and be able to support each other until it is more widely accepted. Because again, it still puts us in this little bubble, and you feel like you're an outsider, to everybody. You have to hide everything. So to be able to find a collective group of people who understand what you went through or had maybe a similar. Now, I'm not saying that every experience is a cookie cutter type abduction or thing. I mean, there are many variances, but as you guys both saw when you were vetting, there are a lot of similarities to a lot of people's abduction stories. Mm-hmm. So let me get back.
Can we answer that question?
Yeah, absolutely.
On the cutting edge?
Yeah.
I'm going to speak for both of us and say that we think we're just part of the, everybody that's doing work in this space. And Jack, I think, spoke to this during his acceptance speech at the International UFO Congress, was that everybody's doing work, and we're kind of like in the golden era of storytelling with this, because there's more and more receptivity to it. So I think we play a small role. Jack, I think you put it very eloquently that night.
Yeah, we're, look, all we have is each other, right? I always look at it that way. And I think looking at that, I look at everything that way. But, we are no one's going to hand us the answers. We've learned this, we know through studying history of mankind that regardless of what the situation is, that sometimes you have to fight for each other. You have to fight for the truth. You have to come together and say, look, like for the people, experiencers, and those who are open-minded, and those who trying to think objectively about, aren't closed off to it. We have each other, and certainly experiencers have each other, but they also need more than that, because a lot of times, you need the filmmakers, and because the mainstream media has been ridiculing these people forever. It's all part of the government apparatus, right? I mean, it's like it's part of the cover-up, whatever that cover-up might be. So having said that, it's up to people like us to say, you know what? No, we are going to search for the answers. We're going to do the best, we're going to do the best we can do to bring these things to light. But also, as part of that, tell people and say to people, look, you're not alone. This is part of this is part of the human experience. Whatever this is, whatever this ET thing is, it's part of the human experience. And because of that, we have an obligation to talk about it, to empathize with others who are going through pretty traumatic experiences related to the ET experience, and come together. I know there's a lot of factions of, benevolent, malevolent, they're good, they're bad, it's biblical, blah, blah, blah. Right. And we're gonna kind of talk, we're gonna show that a little bit in our third film, and we're gonna touch it. That's gonna be part of the third film. But in the end, it's about human beings having these extraordinary experiences. And what do we do with that? We may never have the answers in this lifetime. None of us here may never have the answers. Right. Our children may not have the answers. It might be our great grandchildren one day who finally have the answers. We don't know. But all we could do, we feel better knowing, John and I for sure feel better knowing, and I'm sure you do too, that we're doing something.
Started the ball rolling.
Yeah. We're not sitting back and burying our heads in the sand and being the ugly human, that
We've
intolerant kind of person.
Well, look at 100 years ago,
Right.
I mean,
Absolutely.
You said anything about the paranormal lights in the sky, I mean, it would never be heard of. That you would never even speak those words unless you want to be burned at the stake, or maybe
Sure. Go back 15 years ago, 15, 20 years ago. There would be no receptivity to discussions of this nature. The whole idea of talking about hybrid children, no way. But what we've seen happen over the course of the last 20 years in particular, because there's been more and more, the movies in the 70s, 80s, and 90s kind of prepared us for where we are right now. And I think what really helped was in the early 2000s, shows like Most Haunted really kind of turned people's imagination onto the possibility that there's maybe something more than what we experience in the earthbound plane. So that just started that kind of ball rolling. And then, you start getting more and more TV shows and more, storytelling and more video, thanks to the internet and sharing things on YouTube and things of that nature. People are seeing more and more lights in the sky, aerial phenomena that they can't quite identify. And then you get to the point where the government is, within the last, month or two, is admitting that they don't know what it was in the sky. And when you get to the point where over the past 20 years that we're having conversations like that, that's amazing, because 20 years ago, nobody would have believed it. Nobody.
Well, it would have been a weather balloon.
Oh, it would have never gotten to that point.
That would have been the government, excuse. It was a weather balloon. Don't worry about it.
For the people who are quick to dismiss something like this, it's like you have to look at where we're headed with this right now, and from a couple of perspectives. Is that you're crazy if you think that in 5, 10, 100 years that what we know today will still be the same. It is not going to be the same. What we know, and I'm not talking about just about, intelligent life somewhere else in the universe, but technology, science, awareness, physics is going to be the key that really unlocks the metaphysical side of all of this. And maybe it's going to be something there's like, well, yeah, the whole ET thing is an interdimensional thing, and we're all interdimensional beings. We just haven't connected to it before. And then maybe physics is the answer. Maybe physics is the mathematical equation, or the peeling back of the veil that allows us to see that, oh, it's always been there. We just didn't know. In the
Right.
same way that the Earth was flat, or that the Earth was the center of the universe, or that I've mentioned this before, is that in the late 1800s, 1890s, the U.S. Patent Office considered shutting down because they believed at that time that everything of importance that needed to be invented already was. So here we are 120 years later, and there's a lot more that's still to be discovered. And I look at that as it's accelerating. It's moving much more quickly. So where we're going to be in 5-10 years in our lifetime, we will see radical changes in awareness of our place in the universe. And does that mean we'll have an understanding of ufology in a better way? Hopefully. But I'll go to this line when we were interviewing Dr. David Jacobs for the next film. One of the things that people are waiting for the UFO to land out on the White House lawn. And until something like that happens, or an alien knocks on their front door, they're just not going to believe it. And Dr. Jacobs says, I'm sick and tired of people saying they need empirical evidence when we have 30, 40 years of corroborative storytelling. That's evidence. He said it might not be, scientific, but it's evidential in the sense that there have been thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people around the world over an expanded period of time who have shared similar stories. And people who live in today's day and age are quick to say, it was like, well, they can just look it up on the internet. Well, gee, the internet wasn't so handy 25 years ago. And there are people, back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s that were doing all this work and documenting it. And the stories are still the same. People who are having abduction experiences today are sharing similar things that were shared years ago. People who are being abducted in rural areas of the world who have no connection to electricity or to technology are telling very similar stories. So how is that happening? Is it a collective consciousness? Then we start having the conversation about the whole metaphysical realm, that's really where I think this blows up. This goes into a whole different world of understanding who we are and what is our role in the big picture, the universal cosmic picture.
Right. Well, it's like disclosure. People always ask me when they interview me, when do you think disclosure is going to happen?
Right.
Like, it's happening right now. It's happening right in front of our eyes. It's not going to be something where the craft lands on the White House lawn. It's not going to be like that. It's bits and pieces that we're getting, and it's all connecting a puzzle. And as society is waking up and the veil is thinning, things are clear and we're starting to question, and things now start to make a little bit more sense. And we've been prepared for a lot of things, and so as much as the government doesn't want to admit to any of this stuff, thinking that will cause a worldwide panic, I don't think they give humans credit enough, because I think that a lot of us are just basically waiting for that day when it's going to be, there's going to be no doubt about it. Something major is going to happen, and there'll be no denying it. No matter what they say, it'll be right in front of your face, and you're going to know. Just like people who've been abducted, you can tell them all day long that it doesn't exist, but they experienced it. They know what they went through. So you're never going to change them. They know, whether you believe it or not. I mean, it's a lonely place to be, again, which is why I think it's so important that the stories are being told, because you release so much, and it's also, you find other people. So, because even though we know, we're not crazy, you almost sometimes feel like you may be crazy, because it's like, it's a strange balance, because it's just like, okay, I know I'm saying, but this, even when I'm telling it, sounds crazy.
Yeah. Everybody that we interviewed said that at some point during the discussion with us, whether it was on the phone call vetting or during the interview, this sounds crazy, doesn't it? I know this sounds crazy, but it's hard for me to explain it in a way that imagine the scenarios that you've been abducted. You're sitting in front of some sort of device that is sharing a tremendous amount of information that you alone are sitting in front of at that moment and getting this download of information. And how do you come back and share that with people who have not seen it, who have not have no comprehension of it? I mean, how many times, Jack, have we heard different people share that? You know, it's like, what I've seen, I can't describe it, and it's incapacitating sometimes.
Right.
Well, for example, I mean, I've been having precognitive premonition type dreams since I was a teenager. And I always knew they weren't dreams because I was always taken to this one room. I was always in this one room with a round room with a round pedestal right in the middle with a railing. And it would have like a, I didn't want to say like a television, but like a hologram type of thing. And it from as long as I can remember, I can always remember, like, I go to sleep, I wake up, and I'm like to the side. I just walk up on the pedestal. I stand in front of the television, and it shows me just about every horrible natural disaster or some type of death that's going to happen. And who do you go and tell? When you tell people, they think you're crazy. And it made me wonder, why in the hell am I given this information? You know, I thought, like, am I supposed to save everybody? How the hell do you do that? You know, and if you tell people, people don't believe you. So, you know, what do you do with the information? You don't have the information. It eats you up inside because you know you're supposed to do something with it, but you just don't know what. And it took me a long time to like get through that, because people would say, oh my gosh, you're so accurate. You need to post those online so that you have them down there and there's nobody can doubt you. And I never thought about people doubting me, but they'd say it's just like predictions, you know, you got to put it out there because it's always happens. So I started putting out there, and people started seeing that they were happening. And then it started scaring people. And so that was absolutely not what I wanted, you know, so I stopped posting again. But then there was all kinds of people that would say, oh my gosh, Christina, don't stop posting them. Like, I listened to what you said, and I ended up surviving this, whatever this was, or whatever hap came to be. So like you said, it's very strange to be in a situation where you're given information. And again, it's not like the information comes with an instruction manual, you know, and they tell you what to do with the information. It's just information. And you don't know. I mean, all of my years, it was always about natural disasters. And then about 5 years ago, it started changing, and I started seeing natural disasters, man-made disasters that were governmentally created, terrorist attacks, you know, false flags. It was crazy, the information. And then my world turning, you know, amount of information happened just a couple of years ago. And that's when I actually then found out where this room was and what it all, you know, how it all tied in, and how I knew how to be there. And I'll tell you, the information that ended up coming out of my regression later on was something that changed me forever. I thought the paranormal had changed me, but you know, this experience changed me forever. And even though I was always very open and I thought I knew a lot from my research, I realized I didn't know anything. Like it was crazy. It just blew me away, the stuff that I didn't even realize. So again, I think what you guys are doing is very, very important, because we are in a time of people wanting to hear people's personal stories, but a lot of times they're kind of reenacted and things like this. And, you know, this was just like people's raw emotions, raw experiences, firsthand accounts. And again, it's something that I think that even if you've never had experience, or even if you don't believe it, there's enough stuff in there to just kind of make you go, wow. Maybe there's more to this than just it doesn't exist.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's our goal, right? I mean, that's one of our goals with this, is to have people sit there and say, well, oh, I wasn't aware of that, or I need to pick up a book on that.
Right.
Or I need to have some discussions about this, because whatever, right? Or like I think we had mentioned last time our friend in Fort Lauderdale when we first, after the premiere of the second film in Fort Lauderdale at the festival, she was like, I really have to rethink my whole paradigm. I have to rethink. I've never thought of this. And I was blown away by that because I was like, you never thought of ETs and UFOs, and I think again, human beings, like we all have our own perspective on things. Where I was convinced at age 7 that they were real and there had to be ETs, life in the universe, and it was teeming with life. For whatever reason, I thought that. Well, it's just for that, whatever reason that was, there was a reason why this particular person at the age of 45 had never even considered, like the idea of a UFO or that there was anything to it. And I think that, it's just, it goes to show that human beings, the more and more we do this, the more and more for me, and John, this is probably a conversation we'll have down the road, but it becomes more about sociology and psychology. And again, that human, what are human beings, right? Christina, one of the things you mentioned earlier, and I wanted to just comment on this real quick. We talked about the idea of disclosure, and we always get asked that question, like, when's disclosure coming? And you made a great point, and it's like, it's happening. It's happening. It's been happening. It's happening. I'm going to say a slow drip, but
Right.
It's happening. I've had a recurring dream for years, and in this dream, and it's a great dream. It's a very positive, beautiful dream. And it's at nighttime and I'm with certain people and we're wherever we are. And all of a sudden this fleet of UFOs shows up. There's all these lights in the sky and it's almost like a fireworks show. And it's like this, we're here. And the feeling, it's a euphoric feeling of finally, right? Can you imagine? Like, and I've had this recurring dream over and over. And I think as human beings, we want things to be that way. I always thought, and I've told friends of mine, I said, God, isn't it going to be a great day when we wake up and we hear an announcement on the news, we have a cure for cancer.
Right.
And everyone's going to start crying because it's so amazing. Well, guess what? We are kind of doing that. And it's weird, but you always hear like, oh, the percentage of surviving this kind of cancer goes up. And the percentage of surviving this kind of cancer has gone up and up. We're surviving cancers that we never survived before. And obviously we haven't found a cure, and people are unfortunately still dying of it. It's a horrible disease. But I don't know if that's going to ever happen where we wake up one day and there's this huge announcement and whoever the president is like, we have a cure for, I think that things happen very slowly. It's often a slow burn. And I think that even though we want to feel that euphoric feeling of, oh my God, that moment, that it's not necessarily going to be a moment.
Well, we are a little, though, conditioned by television and movies, and it's very negative. I think a lot of people out there who aren't really sure would be scared, because all that we've ever seen is, when the lights come, laser beams come down and, they either kill you or they suck you up to eat you or, experiment on you. So it's not anything very peaceful. Unless it was like, E.T., and so that was a little different. But I mean, for people to think, what if it was like that? What if it was very peaceful? Mm-hmm. And, we look at here, we say some things, wrong with it. We've got cancer. Our population has cancer. So we're going to do experiments. Sometimes they do experiments on animals. Sometimes they do experiments on humans. They've done it from the beginning of time. And some of them have been very, very cruel, but they have ended up curing many different things. And what if an ET race, their race is being extinguished and they're looking for a cure, and somehow it can be given to them through humans, maybe through alien hybrid children, things like that. Mm-hmm. Why would we feel like, we can understand when our scientists are doing these kinds of experimentations and sometimes keeping people against their wills. I mean, look at how many times they were doing, experiments on people who were in psychiatric hospitals. And back in the day, if you talked about aliens or ghosts, that might be where you'd end up,
Where you wind up, yeah.
right? So, I
Mhm.
mean, what would be the difference? I mean, I think that an abduction is an abduction, but again, we don't know enough about it. A lot of the people that, again, I have interviewed, and you can tell me if it's the same for you guys. It starts out a very traumatic experience, but then they're brought back and they find out they have this beautiful child, and then sometimes they're given information of why they were important, and then it starts to change. And then there's another facet where they don't have any kind of experimentation done on them, and the abduction, well, the abduction is a positive one. It's usually they're given information or things like that that has nothing to do with anything negative. Um, how was it for you guys when you guys were interviewing people? I mean, what were you kind of coming across with?
It's that level of acceptance that it depends on where they are in that A to Z. Where are you on that spectrum of acceptance of what is happening to you? And the people who are in the early stages are still traumatized by it. The people who are more accepting of their experience or have knowing or understanding of why they went through, maybe there's shared information that, like, you chose this path, you're here because you're supposed to be doing this work, and then there's an acceptance of that, and there's comfort for people who've been through that. I look at Geraldine Orozco in the film. Geraldine in 2013 had an experience that started her on the path of awareness. And in 2013, she had an abduction experience, a conscious abduction experience that eventually led her to 4 years down the road having two regressions over the course of 2 months. And what she learned during those two regressions changed her life. She went from a six-figure career and engaged to be married. And in literally 30 days, she quit her job and ended her relationship and said, I need to change my journey. My journey is different. She was also basically had a switch flipped, and she was connected to energy in a way that she never was before, and she could see and read things that she never had the capacity to do before. So, when things like that happen to different individuals, there's this level of acceptance that happens relatively quickly. The trauma is still there. The just total disbelief that this is a reality, a potential, a possibility for me to be in it. But once you start to see that progression and accept that progression, and understand what your role is in that progression, there is more of an acceptance of it. But we did speak to people. There was one gentleman in particular who was in his 60s that we really wanted to have in the film. He's still struggling with it. He was still very emotional when he talked about what his experiences were. And some of it with him too was this, that, after they were done with me, after they were done using me, for lack of a better word, there's a miss. I don't feel like I'm necessary anymore. Why don't they need me? Why did they stop abducting me? Why, there was this, 20, 30 year period in his life where this was going on. Then all of a sudden he's kind of cast aside. And not to say they use the word that I miss it, but it was all of a sudden. And even talking with Stan, when we were doing the interviews with Stan, his experiences happened between 2000 and 2010. And he got to the point where he was like, my life felt more meaningful when I was being abducted, because there was something happening that I was playing a part in. But when it stopped happening, it was more a matter of like, why? Why am I not? Why am I? Why are these
Right.
things not happening to me anymore? So it's such a it's something that deserves attention. It's something that we should, at the very least, listen to. And one of the things that I would encourage people who are listening to this show tonight is that if you know of anybody who's ever shared a story, or you have an idea that maybe you've had an experience, or you've had an experience and you're aware of it, this is the type of film that will help you better process that possibility, what that possibility is. And it comes at you from a perspective of acceptance, that this is okay, that if this did happen to you. So the film really does go through these three specific stages of creating awareness for people who may not believe, or people who are on the fence, or people who kind of believe but are, the dyed-in-the-wool people believe. They don't need any more convincing. But this film was targeting people who may be in the learning process. So there's creating awareness. The second thing is the compassion, encouraging compassion. Just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean that it didn't happen to somebody else. And when somebody is sharing a story with you that is so emotional and so, uh, gosh, unbelievable, and you have you cannot connect to it, you cannot possibly process it in a way that they are, you should at the very least have compassion and empathy and let them share their story without judging, without casting them aside. And then the third thing is for people who have had experiences to find community, seek people out, talk to people. That's the biggest thing. After the first film came out, and then after the second film has come out, the outpouring of people saying, thank you so much for doing what you're doing, because it makes me realize that I'm not crazy, that I'm not alone. We had a ton of women once we put out a promotion for the film that was more of an emotional one, that responded to it, and they kept saying, sharing their stories in these Facebook feeds, and this happened to me. And some of them were telling their stories for the very first time to a bunch of anonymous people that they didn't know, because they felt acceptance. They felt like there were people here who weren't going to judge them. And where men are looking for evidence, women are looking for emotion, a connection on emotion. Men need more of this empirical, pinch me, tangible thing. And women are like, I can connect on an emotional level because I know what it's like to experience loss. I know what it's like to feel isolated. I know what it's like to be considered an outsider. And there's this sense of nurturing there that, for the most part, and I'm generalizing, men don't have. So this film connects much more on an emotional level. And if you're looking for, amazing phenomena, and you're watching 90 minutes of raw emotion, you might feel disappointed. But at the same time, we feel like there's enough people when they do see this film that they're going to go, I know somebody that this would be a great film for them to see. Or, gosh, it would be awesome for me to have a viewing party and invite these 3 or 4 people who don't quite understand what I've been through, but maybe something like this will help them realize that I'm not alone. So we still feel like, the film came out in September, but we still feel like there's a huge portion of this world that needs to see this film. And once it starts to gain that sense of momentum from the people who get it and who can say, point to this film, watch this film, because it'll help you better understand my personal journey.
Absolutely. We have Eduardo from Mexico City. Welcome, Eduardo. And he is asking, how was the film accepted at the UFO Congress event?
Oh, that was an amazing experience. So, we weren't sure what was going to happen. And we had done the festival circuit and it had done well on the festival. It was well received. We'd won some awards and we'd gotten that recognition of, hey guys, this is a good film. From a filmmaking standpoint, for the most part, right, at these festivals. So when all of a sudden you're at the UFO Congress and everyone there, is, okay, we're all about this. So what did you do? What do you have for us? And there was like stiff competition too. It's as the years go by, there's more and more films being made. So it's not just like, if you make a decent budget film and a full length documentary, you're not assured of winning anything, because there was some good competition. So we were gauging people's reactions. They did the night before, on Friday evening, they did a showing of it. They did and then we had a good crowd. There was like 140 or 50 people there to watch it. And so, and we were aware that there was there were judges who were going to vote on the best documentary, but that there was also a People's Choice Award. And the People's Choice Award, I didn't know about that. But that's almost the more coveted award, because it's what the people really think of, your film. So we didn't know. And then the night of the ceremony, we kind of, Alejandro Rojas, who's a friend of ours, I say colleague, and we've kind of worked with him before on the first film, and he was a big part of that whole process. So, but he runs it with his girlfriend, and he was like, it was a lot of competition. He wouldn't let the cat out of the bag at all. He was playing it very close to the vest. And so we were nervous, and I didn't think I'd be nervous, but there were a lot of people there. I mean, it was a huge banquet hall and everyone was dressed up, and I was like, oh my God. Right. So, and I'm like, I'm totally unprepared. And Lori's like,
a conference or something.
well, and John was, at the time, were you in Peru?
Yeah, I was in Peru.
Yeah, so he was in Peru. Jamie, our other partner, was in New York. So it was me and Lori Wagner representing, and also Chase Klotsky was there. So it was the three of us. And Lori's very nervous. She does not like to speak in front of people. So I'm already like, okay, if we do win, I have to say something. And so I'm kind of thinking in my head of what I would say, as thinking on my feet. So, but what was interesting is, the first one was the best documentary that was judged, and we won that. And that was amazing, and we felt, wow. So the people who are judging it, whoever they are, I mean, obviously it's a good film, and it's a high quality, well-made film. So we knew that from what we had gotten, the feedback we had gotten from the festivals and everyone else. But when they did the People's Choice, when we won that, and we go right back up on stage, and so I'm like, oh God, what am I going to say now? Because I kind of said everything I was going to say the first time, so I winged it, because Lori was not saying a word. She was, oh my God, John, it was like, I might as well have been with nobody.
And she hid behind your skirt, right?
She hid behind, and she was ecstatic, but she's so nervous, and but it was an incredible experience. But it was more than I ever thought it would be, because here are people who have had experiences in the audience. Here are people who want to know more about this, who are open-minded. There are academics in the audience, because they're professors. They teach. They want to know more about quantum physics and all that stuff. And then there are the other filmmakers and the researchers, people like Richard Dolan, and these people have been doing it forever, right? And so for them to, and when we won the People's Choice, it was like this roar. It was an eruption. And we were like, oh my God. I felt like Sally Field, oh, you guys love us. You love us. It was like, it was so weird. It was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. And I was humbled, which is why I said what I said. I was like, look, we're all in this together. All the filmmakers out there, we are in this together. This is not a competition. It's certainly not a competition for John and I at all. No. This is about doing the work.
Yeah, we're part of the fabric.
Yeah, part of the fabric.
I'm Jack's being a little bit, I'm going to beat our chest a little bit on this one too, because when you think about what, from an exposure perspective, nobody knows who we are. J3 Films. People know who Stan Romanek is. They maybe know that there was a film about him. If you're in the circles, you know that, and they may know a little bit about a production company. But for the most part, people don't know who we are. Everybody in ufology knows who Bob Lazar is, and Jeremy Corbell has made a pretty big name for himself over the past 5 or 6 years with some of the really good work that he's done. Mm-hmm. So he had 2 of the 3 films nominated for long form, and 2 of the 3 films nominated for short film were Jeremy Corbell films. And so our competition was Skinwalker Ranch, Hunt for Skinwalker, and the Bob Lazar story, and us.
That's tough competition right there, though.
Tough competition. And the judges determined that our film was the one that deserved the award. And Alejandro said that it was very, very close who won the judges award, but he said it was a runaway with the People's Choice Award, which was gratifying for us, because people in the room felt compelled to say, this is worthy, this is important work. Not to discredit anybody else's, but it was a proud moment, I think, for us, because it made us realize that we're doing something important here, and that it's being recognized, and that gives us further, I think, not that we need any prodding, but it gives us further motivation an inspiration to keep doing this. Like I said earlier, I didn't want to do this after the first film, but now I feel like if we're having the impact on individuals' lives that helps them better compartmentalize or understand or process or share with other people that helps them on that journey, then we're doing something from a humanistic point of view that's very worthwhile. That is super rewarding for both Jack and I, and anybody that's been working on our projects. I think they all feel that way. And there was, when I'll go back to the screening at the Fort Lauderdale International Film Festival, was our first cut of the film, which was, I would say, 90% of what the final cut was. There was more music that was added. There's a couple of maybe 5 more minutes added to the film and a couple of tweaks here and there, but not a lot. Jack and Jamie and Lori hadn't seen the final cut. They had seen some rough cuts here and there, but they hadn't seen the final cut. And they're a tough audience because their expectations from a storytelling point of view are high. And, a lot of people have asked me, it's like, were you nervous? And I was nervous with the first film, when the first film came out, because personally, I didn't think it was, I felt it could have been better. If we had more time and more money, it could have been better. So there was a part of me that was like, I knew where all the flaws were all the places where it could be better. But when we went to the screening and it was a year ago, this next week, actually, or in 2 weeks, at Fort Lauderdale for the seating, I was calm, cool, and collected. And I had no concerns whatsoever about how this was going to be received because I knew it was good. And it was good technically, and the story was extremely compelling. So I was completely confident. And when the film was over, Jack and Jamie just were knocking people over, to get to me and say, this is exactly what we wanted it to be. This is so good. This is so amazing. So, from that point of view, is that we realize that our work is about reaching people. It's connecting with them in a way that for the experiencers who were in the film, when we screened this at Pasadena, we had most of the people that were in the film or worked on the film were there. And the joy that they experienced being in the room and seeing that validation from the audience, it was worth everything that we've ever done to get to this point, the frustrations, the trials and tribulations, to be in that room at that moment when those people felt like, I'm being recognized in a way that I never thought I ever would be. And it's good. It's positive.
Yeah.
It's making me feel like I'm doing something and it's going to make a difference. My journey to this point has been beating my head up against the wall because no one's listening. And
Right.
now it's being presented in a way where people are listening. And we've talked about, Jack and I have a soul connection. We can't explain it. And I think that sometimes we read each other's minds. Sometimes we, butt heads over, the minutia of some things and the points that we want to make and the importance of this over that. But ultimately, I think there's this kind of yin yang that kind of weaves itself together that makes it all perfect. And that as a creative person, having a partner that allows you to bounce ideas and share thoughts. And I would say that our collaborative process is more about what we do when we're not being creative. It's the conversations that we have when we're not thinking about what's the storyline going to be, how are we going to present this, what's the best. It's the conversations that we have, and though that's the essence of our fabric is very tightly interwoven as a result of those moments that allows us, I think, to get to that point. So yeah, it's the journey to get to where we are today. And we had a call just the other night or last night, I guess it was, and we were talking about what's next, and we're super stoked. We have so many good things that are about to happen that are only going to help facilitate more storytelling, better sharing, wider audience participation and experience, and a bigger sense of community as a result of that. And that, that's pretty rewarding to think that our part-time hobbyist job is more compelling and rewarding than anything we ever, that we're doing from a professional point of view. This is very rewarding work.
That is awesome. I want to get to what the next step in the movie is, but before we do that, I have Mariana, and she's from Puerto Rico, and she's wanting to know, based on all of your interviews with people, were you able to come to a conclusion? What was the purpose of the hybrid children?
That's a
ahead,
great
Jay.
question. Well, it's a great question. There's really no answer for. I mean, there's no to we're very careful about making conclusions, coming to conclusions about anything. We can speculate. And Christina, we were talking about that before. You're like, well, is it because their planet's dying and they might really need to replenish, right? The DNA is, it needs to be, they have it in, this, like a vitamin B, shot of DNA. We don't know. And we are going to explore that in the next film with some of the, if you will, the paradigms of thought that go along with this phenomena, and also, well, what is the end game? And that's what we all want to know. We do, and that's why it's a great question. It's like, I want to know, well, what are these kids all about? I remember I asked that to John during the Stan Romanek stuff. I'm like, why these kids? What? Okay, so is it for our benefit? Is it for their benefit? Is it for both of our benefit? Is it for their benefit and our detriment? We got to be honest. We don't know. So great question. But
did any of the women that you interview, or even the man that you interviewed, were any of them told why they were having children, or
It was bigger than the children for them. It was about it's the why of it all. It's the why do we exist? Where do we come from? Where are we going? How do we fit into the bigger picture? Things that are so grand that we can't comprehend it. So when you have, we've interviewed different people, we've talked to people who've had experiences, and one of the things they constantly share with us is that I can't explain to you what I know in a way that it would make sense to you because you haven't seen it, you haven't experienced it. So I find it interesting that there are people who are convicted in their beliefs about what they believe to be true. And I think our job as objective observers, and we're leaning into our toe is more than touching the water when it comes to this subject matter. We're willing to believe that it's a possibility. So obviously our storytelling is going to be skewed into the what if this is true, and we're trying to look at it from that perspective of trying to shed some light on it. But we're also at the same time keeping one foot clearly out of the water because we don't know. We don't know what we don't know. But I think the one thing that we have found amazing going into this third film is that there are people out there that have a belief so strong that they will say, I'm right, you're wrong. There's no doubt about it in my mind. From what I've experienced, what I've seen, I know it's going to happen. And we're going to explore that. The three particular paradigms we'll talk about is the biblical paradigm, the ascension, love and light, raising to a higher vibration, and then the colonization, which all three of them believe in lights in the sky, abductions, reproduction experiments, hybridization programs, and hybrid children. But all of them have a very different end game, very different outcome. So how is it possible that there are three very different possibilities that are embraced so strongly by some and discounted by others? And I find it very interesting that the people who are of the ascension belief are the ones who are the most vociferous when it comes to defending that, because we've had a lot of people reach out to us and say, why did you make such a negative film? And I'm like, well, it's not really a negative film because the people who've been through these experiences are telling their stories. Right. So we're not telling a negative story. We're telling their stories, and what they went through was traumatic, and there are negative overtones with that. Right. But we've had some people come out and tell us, no, there's less than 7% of the people who've ever been abducted who said it's negative. It's positive. Everything about it is positive. It's like, well, then you talk to Dr. Jacobs, who said he's done over 3,500 interviews, and he said that yeah, the end game is very clear that it's a colonization process. So, when you have such conviction, it's no different than religious beliefs. It's no different than political beliefs. It's what you know, what you believe in, what fits within your bubble of comfort and awareness, and what you've been exposed to throughout your lifetime is what you're going to believe. And if religion shaped who you are, you're going to have a religious perspective. If you are more open-minded and more cosmos with your perspective and universal, you're going to have a completely different perspective on what that end game potentially could be. Personally, I think that we're all of the same dust. Therefore, we're all of the same family. We're all in this together. We're just learning about where we all fit in. And maybe they're looking at us going like, come on, join the party. We've been here for a long time. You guys just need to catch up.
Right.
And if that's the case, that's awesome, because we're still in the learning mode. Let's embrace that and say that there's a lot more for us to learn. But yeah. It's a journey that if you embrace the journey with an open mind, and we're completely okay with something happening along this journey that says everything that you've talked about to this point was wrong. And if that's true and that comes out,
so be
we're
it.
okay with that. So be it. We'll tell that story.
Right.
Right. There'll be something to tell one way or the other. Well, I love that you guys are looking at all of these different possibilities, because me personally, I feel like all of them could be plausible.
Sure. I do. I agree with that. 100%.
And also, and Christina, also there could be a combination, like I just think it's more complicated.
Yeah.
It's that same thing we're talking about. It's like, there's no real black and white to this. Again, there's the part that people are being abducted. Look, I believe that there are agendas that are more benevolent and there are agendas that are more malevolent. And just like there are bad human beings and really good human beings, I think there are bad ETs and I think there are good ETs.
I believe the same.
When I was younger, I had this really kind of very positive outlook on anything that had to do with ETs and our galactic destinies, right? The fact that we were going to be these universal neighbors, these galactic neighbors, and it was going to be all great, all honky-dory, all wonderful, love and light. And there is still a part of me that feels that way. But having done these films and having been exposed to the people who have gone through these experiences and the research and the researchers who have done a lot of work on this, I just don't think it's that simple. I think that there are negative elements to this that, we talked about it last time on the last show, that if we were, we would be putting them on trial for crimes against humanity.
Right.
You can't abduct hundreds of thousands of, if not millions of people against their will. That's a crime. That's a major crime. You can't rape people.
Our own civilization.
From that standpoint, right? But we're looking at it as humans, right? So ETs might not think like we think. Their perspective on things might be so different. We can't even comprehend what they're thinking. So I do think there's a lot of good that's going to come from this, because I think we're going to become more knowledgeable as a race. As a race of people living on planet Earth, we're going to learn more. We're going to grow from it. And that's the one thing humans have always done, right? We've done horrible things to each other over the course of our existence. But in some ways, we really have grown. We really have evolved, right? And you can look at that in a very positive way. And I think eventually that's the same thing's going to happen with this. But we might have to fight a little bit. We might have to realize that when we do know and realize everything that's happened, oh, wait a minute, the government was actually helping. We all hate the government, right? Oh, they're holding back. They're, blah, blah. Well, maybe they were protecting us from the really evil reptilian ETs, and they really couldn't, they had to do it the way they did it. And they had to get help from the Arcturians and the, and the tall, the Nordics, right? Who knows, right? But nothing is that. Look at Star Wars. There's 8 million species and races, and everyone, you got the dark side and you got the light, you got the good and the bad. Well, I think that's why Star Wars resonates with people so much, because it's a story of humanity. It's us. But we're taking it out to that. It's kind of like that Western in space kind of thing.
Right.
You know, but I'm rambling, but I love that idea of, well, is it good? Is it bad? Oh, it's probably both. It's probably a little bit of everything, you know?
It could be, definitely could be. I mean, look at when I can remember being a kid and watching Star Trek. And, I used to say, oh, these things are coming, the video, television, and, chatting and all of that, all these things, cell phone, all these different things. I told people, and they used to just laugh at me, and they were just like, you watch too much television, Christina. Like, that is space stuff. That's no. And then here we go. We had everything. We've got microwaves, and we've got, different machines that'll give you hot food. And we've got you can have somebody ring the doorbell or call you on your television now, and, have a Skype session and all these different things that they showed that is now reality. So we evolve and we learn new things every single day. That's why I hate when anybody says they're an expert, because I only feel like you're an expert if you know everything. And I don't think there's anybody that knows everything. So I think that we're constantly learning, and that's what I love about what I do. It's like getting that information is amazing, and seeing how it all plays out.
Yeah, you can only be an expert based on the knowledge that's presented, the
Right.
things that are known. And there's so much that isn't known. And that's the
Right.
part of that I, constantly have conversations with anybody that kind of, I mean, I'm not one to try to get into a battle on this, because if you're not there, it's just not worthy
Right.
of a discussion. So I'm not a big fan of that. I'm going to convince you to believe that you should watch this film. If you don't want to watch it, then don't watch it. I don't really care. But I think that for people who are looking for answers, something like this can, be beneficial. But the unknown is such a big part of this. And one of the themes that's in the film is the expanding circle. And there's an ongoing circle theme throughout the film based on Ralph Waldo Emerson's essay that was written back in the mid to late 1800s on circles. And boiled down to a very simplistic explanation is that whenever a circle of thought expands and awareness expands along with it, exponentially more questions come as a result of that thought expansion. So think about the journey that we've been on from humanity, from when fire first was discovered to here we are right now in the colliders, these huge, massive things that are out there, in antimatter and matter discussions that we're having. Wow, we've come a long way. Where are we going to be 100 years from now, 200 years from now, 500 years from now? We don't know what we don't know, but I'd love to have a conversation with the human race in 100 years so that I could learn about where we're going. And maybe it is as simple as just taking a peek through the veil. Maybe that's what, this is the metaphysical part of it that I get kind of jazzed about, because I think that what we're being exposed to is paranormal. It is this idea of interdimensional and multiverse that we just can't comprehend, because we're linearly driven society. We think of A to Z. We think of, from point, A to B is a straight line. There's no other way to go. I love hearing these scientists talk about it's scientifically not possible to travel from here to there because of the time that it would take. It's like, well, yeah, based on modern physics that we know today, but what if there's something different? What if bending space-time is you can get from point A to point Z by, instead of going, in this long linear path, that we just take those 2 points and we wrap them around so that we don't know that.
They've been able to teleport things, so I mean, nobody would have thought that was something out of science fiction. That was something out of Star Trek. You can transport one thing from one place to another place, and now we do it. So yeah, I completely agree. 15 years ago, we would have said, everybody was saying that Earth was the only Earth-like planet out there, and now there's hundreds and thousands of them out there that they, could sustain some type of life. So, I mean, again, we only know how much we were taught, and then how open-minded we are to go beyond what we've been taught to be true. I've always pushed the boundaries. Because things were different for me than other people, I just felt like everybody was in a box. Like, it's just whatever information you're given, that's what it is. And I always questioned everything. I went to Catholic school, and, we try to go and talk to the priest, or, when I have to go to the church, my grandmother would take me there. Oh my gosh, she's talking about ghosts and spirits and stuff. And, the priest would tell me, there's no such thing as ghosts and spirits. And then a little smart ass me, I'd say, well, then why, when we prayed, we say in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, or Holy Ghost? And I used to just piss them off beyond belief. That hated me. And
we would have all been good friends in catechism, because I think we all were the troublemakers.
And I was left-handed, Jack. I was left-handed.
Oh, you were the seed of Satan then.
Right?
Yeah, I was the same way.
Yeah, John and I have this. John's like, well, wait a minute. I would sit there in catechism. I will remember this and be like, nah, it doesn't work for me. Whatever what they were telling me is like, wait a minute, logically, there's a problem here. Like it just.
I got in trouble for not following directions. I got in trouble for challenging the beliefs of the nuns,
Yes.
and they were like,
yeah,
like, this doesn't make any sense to me.
We're free. It's called being a free thinker. If you're, I have this theory that there's a certain percent of the population, like people like us, of free thinkers, that cannot be brainwashed, and I think we therefore we're a threat to the status quo, because we can't be brainwashed. It's like, yeah, no, that doesn't make sense to me. I'm not buying it.
Right. Yeah. You just can't force me to
Exactly.
Yeah. Mark Eddy says, your guests are thought-provoking. Hey, Mark, it's great to see you. And yes, it is. And, again, these are the kind of comments and the questions that we've had tonight that I love. It's getting people out there, and it's making them think, and they want to ask questions, and it's starting to make a change. And I think that that's what we all want, is for those of us that already believe or that have already experienced, we're already there. But then there's so many that aren't, and again, because they're confined by what they were brought up being taught and what they learned over the years, and into their convictions of what they believe to be true. And usually, again, it usually takes a life-changing personal experience to change somebody's mind. But I also have seen over the years, with a lot more of shows and documentaries of firsthand experiencers telling their stories, that is translating as well to make people say, wow, I watched this person tell that story, and it was very convincing. Because there's sometimes you can look at somebody and hear them tell a story, and you're like, they're full of crap. Doesn't even sound right. But there's others, and especially the ones that you guys chose for your film, very compelling. I mean, it takes you just through the whole journey with them, and the emotion roller coaster and the fear and everything. So it's definitely, no matter where you are on the spectrum, I recommend that you go ahead and check this out. And I am getting some people who are asking where they can see the film at. Now, this isn't a free film, and this isn't something that you can rent on DVD, right?
It is not available on DVD. That was more of a decision made by, I don't know if it's going to be. I don't know if there's a big enough demand for DVD. I know there's a handful of people out there that will just wrap their arms around their DVD player and never let it go.
Right.
I can't let go. But it's not the world we live in now. It's changed.
It's not. And it's definitely changed. I never thought, I was one of those people who was like, why would anybody watch a movie on their phone? I have now watched movies on my phone. I know. But I never thought that would be a way to consume it. I've always looked at films as something you watch in a theater, because it's a spectacle. It's something that deserves that. The filmmakers deserve that it is watched in a theater, not on a television in your bedroom, or on a tablet, or even your phone.
How things are changing.
That's the world we live in. But the film is out. It launched on September 3rd. It is on digital platforms as we speak right now. So the best place for you to find out where you can see it on your favorite platform, because it's available on Amazon, it's available on Google Play, it's available on iTunes, or whatever Apple TV is right now. But go to extraordinarytheseating.com. That's the film website, extraordinarytheseating.com. It has the trailer is there. It has the different mini reviews from people who have seen it within the industry that have basically given us some kind words. It also has the different platforms on where you can see it. And I think the if you want to buy it, you can buy it to own it. And it's like $8 or $9 for that. And then to rent it, it's I think on the low end, it's like $3.99 for a 24 or 48-hour rental.
Wow.
So and people are like, well, why isn't it free? And why isn't it on Netflix? Well, the last time I checked, Netflix is not free. You pay
Right.
a monthly subscription for that.
Nothing
Or
is
Amazon
free
Prime,
nowadays.
nothing is free. And it's all part of the distribution game. That's how it works today. It's when you're making a film, you're going through the traditional channels of distribution. It goes through this step. If it's not a theatrical launch, it's launched on platforms. You're given a 2-week window where it's exclusive to just purchases, and then after the purchase process is over, it moves into digital rentals. And when the digital rental process is over, it might move on to one of these platforms. Our fingers are crossed that it will move on to one of the platforms where people have subscriptions. And that's really where we're hoping, because we know that it'll reach a wider audience, but that's not our decision.
Right.
The distributors invest money into getting a film to this point. They want their money to be made back. We are paying a ton of money too for the promotion of the film. We need to have that made back too. Plus, we need to pay back the different loans that we took out in order to get the film made in the first place. So it's not a simple venture to have a film made.
Right.
So yes, there is a cost associated. We really appreciate anybody who does take the time to spend their money, watch the film, and we strongly encourage you to not only watch the film, but engage with us on social media. And the best place to do that is on our Facebook page. So our Facebook page for the film is facebook.com/EX2 the seating. So EX, the letters EX, the number 2, the seating. And we do engage. I answer, I would say 98% of anything that comes down the pike through direct messaging on social media. The ones that I don't answer are usually the ones that are they don't want to talk, they want to shout. So I usually ignore those. But yeah, we're really interested in spreading the word. So I think we mentioned this earlier, is that if you watch it, you see it, and you're compelled by the storytelling, and it resonates with you, and there's a connection to it. Share it with other people. Have a watch party. Tell them to come on over. I'll rent it again, and we'll watch it, and we'll have a conversation, because that's when you start to see sea change, is when
Right.
people are having meaningful discussions about something in a way that they probably haven't looked at it before. And I'll go to the what if it's all true? But what about little kids? When they're 2, 3, 4 years old, the question that you hear from little kids over and over again is why? Why? Why is the sky blue? Why is the grass green? Why do I have to go to school? All these whys, the curiosity, there's a curiosity there. If we're not asking why, it's because we're not curious anymore. We need to be curious. We need to ask questions. That's a problem. Where if we're living a life where the answers are there, I don't have to think. I just have to glide through my life. Why? Why bother? That's my question. That's my why to you, is why bother? Why bother gliding if all you're doing is living within the lines that have been drawn in, the world that a big thing that I've always said to people too is that if you were born in India right now, you'd be a Hindu. And you would have a completely different belief structure. You wouldn't believe in Christianity. You would believe in Hinduism. You would be worshiping cows because of your proximity to where you were born. But we have the ability to be free thinkers. And one of my favorite lines in the film is from Melinda Leslie's, "Don't let anyone ever tell you how to think." That is a huge thing that if there's one parting shot that I could have, is that don't let someone's agenda dictate your free will. Think outside the box, challenge what you believe, and look for answers. Find people who are willing to have the discussions that you want to have, because they're out there. We're here. we'll have those discussions with you too. So we look forward to engaging with people who are interested in thought-provoking conversation, and like Mark Eddy mentioned earlier, that whole idea of thought-provoking. Let's have thought-provoking conversations. Let's do this. Let's all get together and share stories that challenge the norm, so that we can think outside the box and learn from it.
That's why I love you guys. So I can't wait to have you guys back when the third film comes out. You guys got me all pumped up, excited now. As soon as I heard that there's a third part in the trilogy, so I cannot
Well,
wait.
let's make it be a year from now. It should be out in October of next year.
All right, perfect. I'm looking forward to that. Well, I know that you guys have to get out of here, and I appreciate you both coming on. Again, thank you for reaching out to me again, and considering me to have you guys on the show about this. I'm looking forward to next year.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Christina. We really enjoyed this. A lot of fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll talk to you both soon.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed that part of the show. I mean, I love those guys and I love what they're doing. So I think this is going to be, an amazing thing to check out. Make sure everybody goes to the website. Again, it's $2.99, $3.99, $4.99, whatever it might be. Nothing nowadays. I mean, that's just a tiny price to pay, and it's well worth it. Believe me, I watched it myself, and yeah, I think I might have to have a watch party. I know some people who would be on my team, especially, that would be very interested in seeing this film. So I'm looking forward to it. I do want to let everybody know next month is the next event coming up, Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm going to be at Shockfest Horror Film Festival, where the paranormal and the horror industry are going to come together. And boy, oh boy, I don't know if Vegas is ready for us. It is going to be like something like you've never seen before. And I'm looking to do also a Skywatch out there. I'll tell you, I've only been to Vegas once. I went there about 5 years ago for my birthday. And while walking in the daytime, myself and two of my team members were going up the street, and one of my team members, Mike, looked up and saw something in the air, and we caught it on film. It went to some of the top UFO podcast and television shows around the world, and very interesting. So I'm kind of hoping to go back, and from a lot of people that I know out there, they've had a lot of sightings. So, and then I've had some experiencers that as well that live in the area. So I'm definitely looking forward to being there. I'll be there November 22nd through the 24th, the weekend before Thanksgiving. And if you go right now to the Shockfest Horror Film Festival's website, you can get 50% off with the special code of connections. So I'm hoping to see everybody there. I'll be streaming live there. I'm doing a whole bunch of stuff there. So it's I'll be on and off throughout the time. I will be interviewing some of the main speakers. John Zappis will be there, and so many more. So we're looking forward to being there. Cannot wait to see everybody. And Angel, no, I am not going to any club tonight. To be honest, I literally almost forgot the show tonight. Forgot that it was Halloween. Woke up and like my daughter was like, "Oh, Halloween, what are you doing tonight?" I'm like, "Oh, I remember the show. Doing the show. Oh, you're not going to go out afterwards?" Nope. Go figure. Move away and have to take care of everybody, and too tired to go out and party. But that's for Vegas. I'm getting all my strength up for right then. All right, guys. Well, it's about 10 minutes early, but I'm going to head out. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I will be back on, not Monday anymore, Tuesday night with Paranormal Connections. And then again, Thursday for Top Secret News. Next week, I have the Top Trending News segment. After that, I'm going to do a Bigfoot segment. I have some other personal encounters from abduction stories that are going to be upcoming. And in the paranormal, we've got all kinds of interesting things. and some cryptozoology things over there as well. So got a lot planned till the end of the year. So stay tuned, and I will see you all next week. Good night, everybody. Love you.